Week 6 on the horizon. London calling yet again. Let's get into it. NFL podcast from the full 10 yards.
Hello, everyone. Cecil Martin here.
Hey, this is Hunter Henry.
What's up, man? This is Max Crosby, part of Raider Nation.
Hey, this is Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman.
Hey, it's Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks.
Hey, this is Jerry Judy, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, and you're listening to the 14-Yard NFL Podcast.
Yeah, so I've got my clear rucksack packed for the weekend, all 12 inches by 6 inches of it. Thanks ever so much, NFL. I'm glad I don't need huge changes of clothes for a weekend in London. Let's welcome the boys into the podcast. Josh, you're packing your bags for a different reason, mate, this weekend. Looking forward to your little break?
I am very much indeed. I'll be sad to leave you two behind to do the pod without me next week, though. So I'm going to have to get all my hot takes out while I've got them.
Absolutely, mate. Look forward to that then over the course of the next hour or so. And Steve, welcome in, buddy. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks, mate. Not too bad. I've got a question for you that I promised my friend James would ask him because he's a Browns fan. Who are your Funko Pops behind you? Who are the players on your dresser? I promised I'd ask.
You promised you'd ask. I have.
Can I take a stop? Can I take a stab?
Go
on,
then, my
I
friend.
reckon I've got them. So you got Baker on the far left. That looks like Odell Beckham in the middle. And I'm going to Nick Chubb on the right.
He's 3 for 3. So, yeah, Baker Mayfield, Odell Beckham. These two are best of friends, you see. And yeah, my personal favourite, Mr. Number 24, Nick Chubb. So, yeah.
There we go.
Apparently, Miles Garrett's released now, fellas. So, if you're thinking of anything to buy me for Christmas, fellas, yeah, I'll add 95 to my collection. So, there you go.
There you go.
Thank you very much, mate. Nice question to start the podcast off.
There we go.
One that I know the answer to for a change as well. I like that, mate. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. Let's get into it then, boys. Lots of games to talk about. Starts off in London. Let's do it chronologically. It's probably not the most entertaining game on the slate. Let's be completely honest. I don't know what we've done to deserve it this year. Now, let's be honest. 1-4 Miami, 0-5 Jacksonville after a pair of 1-3 teams a week ago. I'm going to it. I'm looking forward to it. I always look forward to it in terms of the occasion, in terms of meeting lots and lots of NFL fans. If anyone is there on Sunday, please do come and have a conversation. If you recognise me, more than happy to chat some ball. So it's always good to bring the NFL UK community together. But let's talk about it just from a game perspective, fellas. It's not going to be a thriller, but it's a huge opportunity, I would suggest, Steve, for Jacksonville to actually get this off the board. Miami certainly not pulling up any trees. Tua might be back, might not be back. Does it really make a difference? They haven't exactly looked brilliant either way, have they?
Yeah, no, this Miami team is turning over a lot of people's expectations. I think they came into the season with that sort of last year they went 500. They finished 8-8 and just missed out on the playoffs. And I think this season a lot of people were thinking, okay, they've made some acquisitions. They've got a few of the bodies in the door that could help. And it just has not gone to plan at all by any stretch of the imagination. I think Xavier Howard's powers as the interception machine have moved on to a certain man in Dallas. That defense is just not working. They just cannot stop the ball, and I know obviously Tua's gone down, and that's impacting things. But he didn't look great when he was upright anyway. So I don't know what's happening in Miami. I know that we've got a lot of guys in our team are Miami fans, and I think a few of them have sort of checked out, but are certainly willing to accept that this Miami team is a long way off just yet and is regressing rather than progressing. So yeah, I don't know, especially if they lose this week, because I genuinely think that Jacksonville could win this game. They've put together flashes, in places, and they've shown, in spits and around the season that they can play well, and they've got some talent on the roster, but putting it all together in one game has been their trouble so far. So if Miami do lose 1-5, basement of the AFC East, I don't know where they come back from there.
No, it is. It's a big game, isn't it? In that regard, I mean, just in terms of the Jacksonville side of it, Josh. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence now lost more games in his professional career than he had in his entire sort of high school, college career. Up to that point, he's obviously off to a bit of a rough start. James Robinson had a nice game when he was involved in the game last week. Urban Meyer seemed to forget that he existed in the second half. Urban Meyer not exactly off to a good start in his NFL tenure. We'll see if he lasts much longer. But yeah, Jacksonville, they've become the London franchise almost by default by the fact that they've been over here all the time. They're always well supported in these London games for that very reason. We obviously get some sort of Sky Sports sort of Jaguar-centric programming every week as well, which obviously, helps develop the fan base. So probably a fairly even split in the crowd in that regard. Miami, obviously, one of the most supported teams in this country as well. So, I mean, from a Jacksonville perspective, they've had a pretty decent record in the UK when they have come over. Do you think they've got a chance of getting the win here?
I think that they've got as good a chance as any of the other games for which they've got. They've probably got a better chance than what they do probably in their own city at the moment. Like Steve says, the Miami Dolphins are on a downward trend. I don't think it's as severe as the score, for example, last week seemed to indicate. I actually think that Miami moved the ball pretty well on offense. They did well at the start of the game against Tampa, just that Tampa then realized that they were stuck in second for a while and just revving up the engine without actually going down into third. And then Brady just seemed to go, "Oh, we got a gear stick, lads." I don't think that Jacksonville have that third gear. So I think that this will be a much more competitive game, but this is the sort of game that Miami need to win, right? Miami need to win this. This would have been circled. This would have been circled in their calendars as we cannot, under any circumstances, lose this game. That obviously packs a lot of pressure on in London, where anything happens in London. Like you say, the Jacksonville Jaguars have had a good record here. There's always a good Jacksonville shock here for some reason. They do like to pull off the odd shock. But my main concern for the Jaguars is that the key to success in London, and you hear players talk about this whenever they're on Sky, you hear past players, past coaches, etc. talk about this quite often. It's about the preparation. It's about having the coaching staff in lockstep with the players, in lockstep with the backroom staff, and everything working as one. Now, let's think of one franchise in the NFL that does not have a very cohesive, all-together franchise right now. That's right, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. When you've got a positional group laughing you out of a locker room whilst you're having your team talk, basically apologizing for abandoning you in Cincinnati after a hard loss, it's bad. When your rookie franchise quarterback decides to break a practice by saying grind after you've just been done for being in a stripper bar in said Cincinnati, it's really bad. So can I trust Urban Meyer to keep the train moving whilst there are so many different moving components in London? No, I do think that Miami will end up just being more regimented. They'll end up rising to the occasion and, putting in a professional enough performance, I think, to get it done.
Yeah, like I say, certainly probably not the game of the week not at all from a record perspective. But obviously, like I say, in the UK, there'll be 60,000 plus at Tottenham. So yeah, looking forward to it for all of those reasons. And it opens up the Sunday slate of games later on Sunday. Probably the matchup of the weekend. The 4-1 Ravens, the 4-1 Chargers, two teams that have been involved in lots of close games, two teams that lead their respective divisions. Got the makings of an absolute classic. The Ravens struggling defensively, the Chargers struggling defensively. Whatever is the over-under, take the over, I would suggest. Steve, surely the game of the weekend from a neutral perspective.
Yeah, after the two performances last week from these two teams, especially their quarterbacks, this is an excellent game to then look at the schedule and go, oh my God, them two are playing each other next weekend. Fantastic. This is a real tasty one. Justin Herbert will be hoping he can continue putting up immense amounts of points and winning games, whereas Lamar Jackson is going to have, like you said, Josh, he's going to have to start showing that he can do it in more than just the fourth quarter. But props where props are due. He's had an incredible game, and he'll be looking to build on that as well as his building chemistry with other receivers as well. Like Marquise Brown had a couple of flashes in the game on Monday Night Football, but he needs to get in the game more. Like you said, he can't just be constantly Mark Andrews or nothing. I know he's a tight end, and I know that sometimes those middle of the field routes are quite often to the tight end, but they need to find ways to get Marquise Brown into the game a bit more, because I think there is a good player in there. I just wonder how limited that is with Lamar Jackson, with his rushing ability and his desire to want to rush the ball. Although looking at that, last week he didn't seem to want to do that too much. The Chargers chance to go to 5-1 and really cement themselves above the AFC West. I must say though, if Baltimore manage to win here, that AFC North gets a bit nerve-wracking again, doesn't it? It's two teams that I think are definitely going to be in the conversation come January. There's a couple of other, I think there's about 4 or 5 AFC teams that are going to be in the conversation come January, and all going to be with sort of 13 plus wins or around that sort of level. So yeah, really interesting game matchup. They're separated by barely anything. So points per game, LA has 28.4, Baltimore has 27.2. Points allowed per game, LA has 23.2, Baltimore has 23.4. So there is barely anything in it in terms of the stats previously. Baltimore's rushing defense is somewhat better than LA's, so maybe if they can stop LA's run and stop Austin Eckler, then that might be a method to win the game. But I can only see this being another high scorer. I wouldn't be surprised if both teams go 30, maybe even 35 plus again. I think we're in for another real barnstormer.
Yeah, absolutely. 51.5, I believe, is the over/under. Josh, going to be surely offensively going to be a classic.
Batter the over. Yeah, like Steve says, realistically, both of these teams have fantastic offenses, which I think actually go entirely against the weaknesses of the other's defense. So Baltimore's current weakness on defense is their passing defense. Justin Herbert and Mike Williams will take care of that, no problem. They'll have no problem against that. Meanwhile, the Chargers couldn't stop the Browns on the ground. Lamar Jackson's going to have a field day. You could end up seeing Lamar Jackson getting 150 odd yards just on the ground. I think that the issues that Baltimore had on offense against the Colts, in that Lamar Jackson couldn't get free all that often, you're not going to see that this time around. The Chargers don't play that kind of defense. They play bend not break rather than go all out for the QB. Derwin James will obviously have something to say about that, but he can't do it all on his own. The Chargers can score for fun. We've seen that. We've seen that a lot just in the last week. The handicap is pretty much just home field advantage. It's -3.5 for Baltimore. Chargers do have to come east. That could really just be the end of it, really. Just home field, give it to Baltimore, because there's a fag paper between the two teams. It's going to be a great matchup, really. Either way, it's all gravy to the neutral.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be the one I'm tuning into on the train on the way home from London. Looking forward to it. And trains depending, I'll get off the train and I'll run home to hopefully at 9:05 catch what's probably the game of the late window. Feels like I say it every week when the Browns are involved, so apologies for that. But
we're so sorry.
I shouldn't really make any apologies. Browns, Cardinals, Steve, it's definitely the game of the late window, isn't it? Let's be honest. And I'm fairly confident as a Browns fan.
Yeah, I think this could be the Cardinals' loss. I think this has the potential to be a bit of a bump in the road. I think the Cardinals have got to lose at some point. I don't think they're going to go 17-0, and I think that Cleveland will be looking for that sort of comeback game, and they'll be looking to put a performance together and make sure that they can. They can see off a team that have surprised an awful lot of people. I think obviously I know there was potentially quite a few injuries with Cleveland in the loss to Los Angeles, so I don't know if all of those are going to be back. Assuming that most of them come back, I think this has got the potential to be a real close game. I think it'll be interesting to see how Cleveland deal with that Arizona pass rush, especially if, for example, Jedrick Wills can't come back. I think that would be a huge loss if he can't play. But again, I think Arizona have shown the ability to create plays downfield, and they're going to look to DeAndre Hopkins. They're going to look to their weapons and try and create plays down the field. With Cleveland, it's I think they did everything in their power to win the game last week, and obviously couldn't get it done. They're not going to have it's not an easy game to come off a loss like that to, is it? Hosting the best team on paper in the NFL. I certainly don't think it's all said and done. I think this is going to be a tight one. It wouldn't surprise me if Arizona do sneak a win. I think that's just the momentum that they've got at the moment. Everything is clicking for them. They've figured a lot of things out, and Kyler is playing at such a high level right now that it wouldn't surprise me if he gets yards on the ground as well. But I think, look for Cleveland to tackle Kyler like they try to tackle Lamar, because they're very similar in terms of their rushing ability. And obviously Cleveland see Lamar twice a season, sometimes 3 times a season. So Cleveland are well versed in how to deal with a rushing quarterback that has the elusiveness that Kyler and Lamar do. So I think there's a lot of some swings in Cleveland's favor there, but just because they know how to do it doesn't mean they can do it. So that's a whole other ball game.
Yeah, it most definitely is a whole other ball game. Josh, you said stop it. You said don't be too confident. When I say confident, I'm confident the Browns will put up a good performance. I think Baker Mayfield plays his best ball when I think Baker plays his best ball when his back's against the wall, and even in a good performance he's had, he's more than his fair share of critics this week. I always think he plays at his best when he feels backed into a corner. I think the ground game is. Look, it's the best ground game in the league, isn't it? I don't think there's any bias in me saying that. I think the statistics back it up. And you've took as much convincing as anybody on the Cardinals. So, they're obviously 5-0, deservedly 5-0. So I'm not certainly saying it's going to be anybody winning this by a couple of scores, but I certainly think it's going to be a good game. What do you reckon?
Oh yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I did my picks for this week this morning, just to make sure I got it in before the Thursday night football, and I did pick the Browns. Won't be by much, but I'm taking it by, again, the same as with the last game, with the Chargers-Ravens game. I look at complementary football, and I think that the Browns have the complementary football to Arizona's weaknesses. Arizona is the 5th worst rushing defense in the league. Browns is one of the top rushing offenses in the league. Arizona and the Browns are similar in passing offense, both relatively similar in passing defense. I think Arizona have a slight advantage, but that just tells me that, Cleveland at home, it's going to be cold. Arizona's from the desert. They're going to be facing a really mild, cold stadium where you're just going to have to ask your linemen and your linebackers to tackle constantly. Can they keep that up? I don't know. Maybe they can. But the stats don't really show it. It's a case of, can they contain Kyler? And Steve, he has a Geordie accent, but he puts things really eloquently. And, we face Lamar Jackson twice a year. The Browns facing Lamar Jackson twice a year means that they know how to scheme against that kind of quarterback. I think it's going to be a case of containing the pocket. And Kyler gets so close to getting sacked a lot of the time. He gets so close to getting sacked about 3 or 4 times a game, and he gets out of them. When you face someone like Lamar Jackson twice a year, you learn how to take into account that additional deft step that these kind of elusive quarterbacks take. That could well be the difference. But Arizona, they're 5-0 for a reason. Kyler Murray is having an MVP year. They can take the top off the defense. They can take the top off of any defense. And as we saw in the Chargers game, if Cleveland doesn't have its corners back, and you give Kyler Murray 3 or 4 seconds for his wide receivers to get open, they'll torch you over the top. So yeah, it's going to be an incredibly close game.
I've got some breaking news in regards to this game. You ready? The Cardinals have placed star pass rusher Chandler Jones on the reserve COVID list due to a positive test.
Oh, let's go. Let's go. I mean, obviously, I really hope that he's okay. Obviously, and we just want him to be okay. But at the same time, let's go.
Assuming he's vaccinated, he needs to produce 2 negative tests within 24 hours between each one, and then he can return. So we're still 5 days away from the game. So there's every chance that he could return. But that's if he doesn't play, that's a turn up for Cleveland. That is. Although, like I said the other week, he hasn't had a sack since week 1. He had 5 sacks in week 1. He hasn't had one since.
Yeah, but that just means that he's just begging for one against a team like the Browns, where that sort of record ends up getting broke. Oh, does Chandler Jones listen to the Cole Beasley way of life? Find out Sunday.
Just talking of the Cole Beasley way of life, I did like the subtle bit of commentary from Al Michaels on Sunday Night Football when he said,
yes, as did I.
Was he? Cole Beasley's been rather silent tonight for a change or something. Was his exact words?
Yeah. That means stitches at like 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice one. Right then, fellas, let's speed it up a little. Still another 11 games to get through. So let's whiz through these. Steve, start us off. Thursday Night Football, Philly. I'll tell you what, your schedule is rough, my friend. Philly, Tampa Bay.
I love getting up at 1 o'clock in the morning to watch Philadelphia get absolutely trounced by the reigning champions. I think there's only really one way this game's going. I think Philadelphia have showed in spurts that they have weapons to work with, but ultimately they're struggling to put together performances to win games, and I don't think that's going to come against this Tampa Bay team. Whilst Tampa Bay has their deficiencies and they can be got at, I don't think Philadelphia are the team to do that. Their pass rush isn't quite working at the moment. There's too many players that aren't quite performing to the level they need to be for the contracts they're being paid, and the jury's very much still out on Jalen Hurts. So we'll see. But Tampa Bay come into the game having just put 45 points up against the Dolphins. They'll be looking to match that again. Tom Brady did have a brace on his thumb in his press conference yesterday morning. I think this afternoon. Sorry, and there was talk about his thumb, on his throwing hand as well. But this is Tom Brady. He's 44. He's made of literal platinum, so he will play until he's in his 60s. I've no doubt. This will be I think a comfortable Tampa Bay win. But yeah, I think after this game, the Eagles' schedule does ease up a little bit. So I'll be glad to get this out of the way.
Let's move on. Josh asked the question last week or earlier on in the week, will Washington actually not give up 30 points in a game? Here's a test for them. Washington, Kansas City.
Yeah, it's not going to be this week, is it? Kansas City, wounded, but going on to a much nicer section of their schedule now. And I think that they'll go straight away. I don't think that you're going to see them having to wade into the water. Their offense, it continues to pop. There's a few stutters around, but it continues to pop. And this Washington defense, if you throw it over the top, then you're going to get it 9 times out of 10. Washington has a lot to address. They don't seem to have an identity on offense. They have even less of an identity on defense, considering that they had one and now it's in crisis. I just can't see them making the adjustments this week against Kansas City. I reckon that Kansas City are going to end up seeing them win by about 14, 15, 16, something like that. Definitely over the 6.5 they're given on the spread. Sean, you get this one's even bigger spread here. It's plus 10.5. The New York Giants are as they host the Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, man, you need to have a chat. I don't know what I've done to deserve all these New York games you give me for these previews and review podcasts. But yeah,
I just love you, mate.
Thank you,
New
mate.
York
Thank
bias.
you. New York Giants with Mike Glennon in all likelihood at quarterback and no Saquon Barkley. Oh my good lord. yeah, Aaron Donald's going to have a field day, isn't he? Let's be honest. God, it could get ugly, and it could get ugly quickly. The Giants, to be fair, they made the first half against the Cowboys quite competitive, but obviously very quickly unravelled. And yeah, look, it's not the team you want to be facing on the schedule when you've got all of those injuries on offense. Don't know either about Kenny Golladay. He certainly hasn't obviously lit things up since that move, but obviously one of their best wide receivers, certainly on paper as well, likely to be missing. There's just too many things here for the Giants to overcome. It's no surprise, I think, that the spread is the biggest for the week in favour of the Rams in terms of all of the games. Yeah, they surely are the absolute slam dunk bet of the week, and fully expect the Rams to move to 5-1. Steve, next one for you, another one that's big on the spread. I can't believe they're actually favoured by 10 points considering the record, but the Indianapolis Colts against the Houston Texans.
Yeah, a big battle of the 1-4 teams in the AFC South, and dare I say that I think the Texans have a better chance of winning this than what they're being given on the spread. Davis Mills looked quietly quite good last week. When it's a guy that you're not really expecting anything from, I think last week he actually looked okay. And considering it was his third start of the season, so I think he looked okay. I think this Indianapolis team needs to come alive. They need to have it. Then perhaps this is the game they need. They need to have a game where they can sort of come alive and come away with the win. Because we talked about how they did everything right apart from the fourth quarter against Baltimore and still lost the game, and they need to turn that into a victory. Wentz looks certainly a better player than he did last year. I don't know if he's quite back to his old self yet, but looked a better player last year. But this defense has got to play better if they're going to want to do anything down the stretch. So, I think I'd have Indianapolis winning this one. I don't think by 10. I think Houston will make it close to that. And also, it's a divisional matchup game. Divisional matchups are always interesting. You never quite know what's coming. So I think the Colts win, but maybe by a touchdown rather than 10.
Just to add to your breaking news, my friend, I don't know if you've seen it flash up on your screen, but further to Chandler Jones on the COVID list, we've also now got Titans punter Brett Kern, maybe not that relevant, but also Eagles tight end Dallas Goedert. He's also now on the COVID list. So I haven't talked about COVID too much this year. Let's not hopefully make it a habit, but certainly for the first time in 6 weeks, it seems to be becoming an issue.
Close all the stadiums.
Zach Ertz 4 touchdown game incoming.
Yeah, get that jersey out, my friend. Get that jersey out. Josh, let's move to you. Can the Detroit Lions finally get on the board? Cincinnati Bengals, the opponent.
I'll tell you what, you might not even need a COVID outbreak for this one. This has all the trappings of a trap game. The Detroit Lions have come close twice now against the Ravens and the Vikings. And I put Cincinnati firmly in between those two, in terms of potential for Detroit to be able to snag a win. Why not? Cincinnati are an efficient side that will make any game a coin flip. I think they're they're the sort of team that plays to the opponent. Burrow and Chase's connection is a delight to watch at the moment. And honestly, I have to admit, I've really enjoyed watching Cincinnati play. Some of the stuff of which they come out with is excellent. There are mistakes, and Cincinnati will give a bit to Detroit, and I think Detroit will take what they can get from them. Burrow's not perfect. The one interception that Burrow threw last week, where it was basically just a gift to the linebacker. He does possess that in him at the moment. That's because he's practically a rookie. So, Detroit won't be a pushover. Cincinnati won't be perfect. Detroit have got playmakers too. I've been really impressed with Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift, for example. I'm not going to give it to Detroit, though. My brain's telling me Cincinnati by 5. My heart's telling me Detroit by 1 with a last-second field goal that goes in their favour. Why not? Sean, I've got a good one for you this time. I've given you one that's all right. It's an NFC North clash. Green Bay go to the Chicago Bears. The spread plus 4.5.
Yeah, the classic NFL's oldest rivalry and all that jazz. you've surely got to fancy the Packers. They seem to have sort of got the results trending in the right direction, although the performance, obviously, against the Bengals did leave a fair bit to be desired. We didn't touch on it much on the review show that we did, but I wonder what Aaron Rodgers was thinking when they trotted out Mason Crosby on third down after he'd already missed field goals to win the game. Would have been very interesting press conference had Mason Crosby missed another one and leaving Rodgers on the bench for a third down. But obviously, all's well that ends well. Mentioned the Bears a few times. I think their defense is pretty good. I think it's probably one of the top, certainly top 10, if not sort of, maybe top 5 units in the league. They will keep them in games, but I just don't see enough from this offense to keep pace with the Packers. It's at Lambeau Field as well. I think the spread feels a little generous, if I'm honest, at 4.5. I would imagine the Packers will probably win this fairly comfortably, I would probably say by 10. Maybe even a few more than that. So, for me, I think a relatively comfortable Green Bay win. Steve, the closest game in terms of the spread, at least for you, is Minnesota and Carolina.
Yeah, Carolina coming to this one after a frustrating home loss to Philadelphia, wanting to probably get back in the win column and improve to 4-2, which would be very respectful of Carolina. Sam Darnold is the most polarizing quarterback at the moment. He's shown flashes in games where he's looked calm and collected and has certainly looked like he's turned the corner, and then you have a game like last week where he throws 3 interceptions and throws the game away for Carolina. He can't hope to have a long NFL career if he keeps playing like that. And Kirk Cousins is quietly having himself a pretty good season in Minnesota. But I think the biggest talk in Minnesota at the moment is, whilst Dalvin Cook is out and is questionable for this game, is the emergence of Mattison at running back for Minnesota, who had himself a hell of a game last week and put up, I think, almost 150 yards, I think it was. So yeah, Minnesota getting next man up mentality and certainly picked up the win last week to move to 2-3. So yeah, I think this is one of those sort of middle of the road battles where it could be a very much 2 teams around the 500 mark come the end of the season. Christian McCaffrey should probably come back. I'm surprised he didn't play at the weekend, but he'll probably be back for Carolina. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if Sam Darnold can't throw the ball to him. So yeah, a lot to figure out in Carolina, but they are trending in the right direction. They look a lot better than they did last year. I just wonder if Darnold is the long-term answer. I'll take Carolina by 3.
Josh, let's move to you. 2 teams that started off 3-0, both now find themselves 3-2. So Las Vegas and obviously new interim head coach against the Denver Broncos.
To quote one of my favorite American TV shows, well, how the turntables. Because my goodness, I remember in week 3, I had fans of the Broncos and the Raiders just all over me saying, why aren't these 2 in the top 10? They're unbeaten, they're looking fantastic. And all I could say is, look, it's not there. It's not passing the eye test. And these 2 certainly aren't passing the eye test anymore. They looked awful last week. Both teams did, I thought. And, with the Raiders now having to deal with their head coaching situation, with Denver having a sort of in and out in terms of whether or not Teddy's head's actually right at the moment. Like part of me did wonder whether or not Teddy should have played on Sunday. He passed the protocol, but he still didn't look right to me. And this will be a really interesting clash, actually, as to who can arrest the slide. I can't actually decide as to who will come out better from this. Whether or not Vegas will ride off the back of their turmoil, because it is turmoil. You can frame it whatever way you like, but it's a problem for them. Or whether or not Denver will. Whether or not Denver will just bounce back and go, no, that was just a mulligan against Pittsburgh. This is who we really are, and then go back to playing the kind of football that got them 3-0 in the first place. Either could happen. So, I give it to the home team based on home field advantage on this one. It's another one where I just go to the fact that going to Denver is quite difficult. Mile high and all the rest of it. It's a divisional game. I reckon that both teams will bring it. Broncos by 3, but don't take the spread, which is -3. So exciting, but not in the way that an exciting game is usually billed. Sean, two of the more well-supported clubs over here. The Dallas Cowboys travel to Foxborough to face the New England Patriots. Spread is 4.5 in Dallas's favor.
Yeah, they used to be two of the most supported. I don't know how many of those Patriots fans have headed south to Tampa. That's a different story, though, I suppose. Yeah, look, I mean, on paper, this is a comfortable Dallas victory. This is a team that is seemingly, not missed a beat in terms of offensively. They look what they were when Dak was in the team 12 months ago. If anything, probably a more rounded unit, as there's been a recommitment to the running game. Ezekiel Elliott looks the best that he's looked for years. I know he obviously has the feed me celebration, but it does just go to show if you get him involved in the game, what he can produce. Tony Pollard's become a nice complementary piece in there as well and gets plenty of touches as part of the game plan. The Patriots are just a very, very difficult team for me to figure out at the moment. Really don't know what to make of Mac Jones at all. He's not necessarily done anything glaringly badly. He hasn't also done anything glaringly brilliantly. He hasn't really sort of set the world alight one way or another. I think defensively, Matthew Judon should give a bit of a shout out to. I thought they overpaid for him when free agency rolled around, but he's really turning out a nice level of performance for them defensively. You always fancy Belichick to coach up and scheme to keep games competitive and close, but you just think surely to God Dallas are going to have far too much in the locker for them. I mean, the spread's 4.5. You've got to see Dallas being able to win this by a touchdown. I would have thought at least, if not more. Another one I would probably go against the spread and take Dallas to win. Probably a shade more comfortable than that. Steve, let's move Sunday Night Football. I joked about how the TV networks would love the fact that Russell Wilson's gone. Geno Smith versus Ben Roethlisberger in prime time. Oh boy, what a lovely, lovely way to round off Sunday night.
Could you imagine if you went back to like 2015 and said that the 2-3 Seattle Seahawks will be going to the 2-3 Pittsburgh Steelers, and we don't know which team is going to be worse?
My heart would soar.
What a change up. I mean, props to Geno Smith. When he did come into the game, I don't think he looked too bad last week. I know he's not Russell. I don't think he's not Russell Wilson, but you're talking about one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And how they cope without Wilson is obviously going to be a massive impact. There's worse games that they could go into without Wilson. I think this Pittsburgh team had a bit of a bounce back game last week, and Roethlisberger looked a bit more sort of calm and completed the passes he needed to, but he's still obviously on a downward trend. And I think we are watching his last season in the NFL. I think that's becoming obvious now. And I think if there's a team that could that they could beat the Seattle Seahawks, I think it could be the Steelers. Najee Harris is emerging a bit and is becoming a bit of a key component in this Steelers offense, taking some of the pressure off Roethlisberger. And so if Seattle wants to win the game, if they're going to have any chance of winning the game, they're going to have to stop the run. Which is not one of their strong points because they are averaging 145.2 rush yards allowed per game. So that's not a good sign for them. However, what is a good sign for them is they'll notice that Juju is out for the season after that shoulder injury he sustained last week. So that is a big loss for Pittsburgh. And you do wonder where Roethlisberger is going to be throwing that ball if Juju can't play. And a big gamble there from him. He decided to test the market and try and get free agency. He signed a 1-year prove it deal in Pittsburgh, and now he's not even going to play through it all. So somebody's going to pick up him in the offseason for an absolute bargain next year. It's a tough one. I think we're going to get a chance to see what Seattle are like without Wilson, which we've never done, by the way. And I think he played something like 149 straight games to start his NFL career. He's never missed a game in the NFL, which is incredible longevity, especially in this league. So the Seattle team without Wilson under center is going to look very strange. So we, a reserve judgment on them, so we see the full game with Geno Smith. But I think this might be a bit almost a bridge too far, but it'll be close. I think Steelers take it maybe by a point.
Josh, round us off, my friend. Buffalo, Tennessee is the Monday Night Football, and probably a sign of the times. Tennessee at home get 4.5-point head start on the spread.
Yeah, so this is one where I think that the dominance of Buffalo definitely brings this into focus as one where you can't see Buffalo not winning this game. But this does have the trimmings of an excellent matchup. The running game for the Titans is obviously massive, but the Bills are number 3 in rushing defense. So as long as they keep that up, Derrick Henry looks to be put at bay. And then it's a case of, do the Bills have enough on offense to match up against the Titans? Well, the Titans have one of the worst defensive sets going. So it just seems to be mismatches rather than outmatches for the Titans. I do see Buffalo running away with this just on the basis of, you're trying to put a square piece in a circle hole by the looks of the Titans. The spread's 4.5. I'd probably double it. I don't think it's going to be a runaway. But by the same token, Buffalo do seem to be running away with every game that they play at the moment. So it could easily be 10-15 on the road, of which, again, would just show the dominance of the number 1 team in football at the moment. And just to round it off completely, I want to go back to the Seattle game for 1 second. Does anybody else really want to see the Seahawks Twitter come out with like Russell Wilson just cooking at his home or something whilst the game's on, just so that we have a let Russ cook section? He might not be there, but he's still cooking.
Instead of him starting on Sunday nights, he starts his own cooking channel.
Exactly.
That is some Seattle PR right there. Someone needs to do that, because that would be amazing.
You could easily get a sponsor for that. Imagine, and that kickstarts his career after football as well. He just turns out to be this fantastic chef that social media just absolutely goes crazy for. It'd be immense.
Josh, yet again proving he's wasted at the full 10 yards. There you go. Seattle Seahawks Twitter, get in touch. Our man will sort you out on Sunday Night Football. We've gone through all the games, fellas. We've got a bit of time left, so let's talk around a few teams that have been some surprise packages this year. We're now getting into, I think you described your power rankings, Josh, as a little bit more settled these days. I think you're starting to sort of get a grasp in terms of where you think teams genuinely are. There's not the sort of flash in a pan result one week to the next now. We're kind of getting a handle on things. So let's throw that question out to yourself. Give us a team that you are surprised by positively, and then give us a team you're surprised by negatively.
Yeah, so a team that I'm surprised by positively, and this might simply be just because of me just not reading the tea leaves properly, the Cincinnati Bengals. I think that they actually are a very competent football team that could win on any given week. You can put them in front of almost any team, and you can go, oh, don't know, maybe, just maybe. Yeah, I can't poke too many holes at any of their position groups. I can't poke too many holes in terms of their playmaking. It just seems that they need time to gel, and they're still making great plays and they are really exciting to watch. I think that they are around middle of the pack, but when you consider that this team was about 30th, 29th, 30th a couple of years ago, and even last year. So to be now middle of the pack and looking to the future is excellent for them. And, they are a surprise package. I'm a little worried about them as a Browns fan, if I'm perfectly honest with you. The missus put the Bengals under, I think it was under 7.5 she had on her regular win, Zachy. And she's already texted me to say, what the hell are they doing? I'm losing this, aren't I? To which I then pointed out the fact that she had KC above 12.5, and she started to get a little worried on that one. So yeah, that would be my positive one. My negative one, in terms of who I'm really disappointed by, the Miami Dolphins. Where was this fantastic Miami Dolphins team that we were promised, lads? where's this Miami Dolphins defense? We talk about Washington's defense a lot, but Miami Dolphins had a really good defense. It just doesn't seem to be there anymore. It's almost like the stuffing has been kicked out of Miami. I don't blame it on the quarterback. I didn't think that Tua was all that great anyway, and I think that Jacoby Brissett's not really that much of a ring down. It just seems that all of their playmakers just aren't doing the business, and their defense, which is what they prided on, is just not getting there. So, yeah, Bengals trending up, Dolphins trending down. That's what I've got, gents.
Steve, let's throw the same question out to yourself, mate. One good, one bad.
So I think for good, before this weekend, I would have said Carolina, but that loss against Philadelphia they just looked so poor offensively. I know a lot of that's down to Sam Darnold, but unfortunately, you can't hide from that. So I don't think I'm going to say Carolina. I think it's difficult to look anywhere other than the Chargers, really. It's an obvious choice, but I don't think any of us were expecting them to be this good, this quickly, and especially with a brand new head coach. Brandon Staley's come in. Obviously, he's from that Sean McVay coaching tree, and he's going to have some of this offensive wizardry about him. But to be this good this quickly is a bit of a surprise. Justin Herbert looks the real deal. They've got some really good offensive skill players, and their defense looks solid as well. Like that bend don't break that you mentioned, Josh, they've really embraced that, and like I've said before, they should be 5-0, but they're not. But they've been a real surprise package, and I think it's getting to the point now where we have to be talking about the Chargers as a Super Bowl contender. We have to, because they are so good at the moment that until they start losing games and making silly mistakes, that sort of thing, you'd expect them to be there. If not in the ball game, certainly I think they can definitely make a case for them being there on championship weekend. So I'd say that the Chargers, any number of teams could be a surprise package, but the Chargers for me. In terms of disappointment, you took the words out of my mouth with Miami. You've already covered those. Probably Indianapolis. Again, this Indianapolis team is very similar to Miami in that they just squeezed into the playoffs last season. They've, Frank Reich's done quite a good job of cycling through the quarterbacks and still managing to get this team to a winning record. And this year they just look different. I don't know where they're losing all of these games. I don't know if there's this specific thing that you can put the finger on, but I don't think it's an easy enough to point to Wentz. I don't think Wentz has been that bad. Certainly not as bad as some quarterbacks in the league. And I think they're just not performing all over the league. And I think if we'll come to it in a second, but I think there might be a certain hot seat getting a little bit warm in Indianapolis, especially if they lose to Houston this weekend. So for a disappointing team, Indianapolis for me.
Yeah, two good shouts. I'm kind of surprised in some extent that neither of you went for the Cardinals as the pleasant surprise. I think to be 5-0 in that stacked division, and probably coming into the season, the team that I think all three of us would have probably picked as the basement dwellers in the division, although we said consistently how stacked it was. We probably had them pegged as the least favoured. I think they've obviously got off to a heck of a start. I also think the Cowboys, for me, probably exceeding where I would have put them, and I think that's predominantly down to the massive improvement on the defensive side of the ball. They're ranked 14th total defense, so it's not as though they're all of a sudden shot into the top 5. But when you consider they were a bottom 5 and at times an historically bad defense last year, certainly to start the season, they were ranked 32nd in most categories, particularly against the pass. Just goes to show that if you can get into that sort of middle range from a defensive side of things, their offense is more than potent enough to take care of most teams. So I think Dallas and Arizona are probably the two that I've been pleasantly surprised with. I think in terms of the team to be disappointed with, again, for me, it's probably got to be the Chiefs. I know they've had a rough schedule. There's no doubting that the schedule hasn't been kind to them. They've played Cleveland, they've played the Chargers, they've played Baltimore, and they've played Buffalo. I mean, let's face it, those are 4 teams that I think we're all probably in agreement will be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
In some order. So it has been a rough schedule, do not get me wrong. But the only win they have at the moment is against the Eagles. And I think, Steve, you watched that game, and at times, and I think in your review last week, you kind of alluded to the fact that this defense is going to cause them problems, and it will continue to cause them problems. They've got an awful lot of working out to do. They're ranked 32nd defensively, and completely, reverse what I just said about the Cowboys. The Cowboys were 32nd ranked defense last year and had a potent offense, and it got them to a losing record, even with Dak in the team. The same thing is happening here with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. They've got a potent offense, but if you're conceding 30 plus points, you're conceding time of possession, you're giving up a ton of yards. I know a lot of people point to the fact that the Chiefs' turnovers are up, but there is more and more pressure on that offense to keep producing. And it just, it doesn't happen week in and week out. So the Chiefs, with a lot to turn around in terms of where they are in the division, like I say, who would have thought that after 5 weeks they would have been last? Steve, going to flip it back to yourself, buddy.
Just a quick one on the Chiefs defense. I've actually got some stats for the Chiefs defense, which are eye-opening, because I think over the last couple of years, we can all agree that in 2019 and 2020, I mean, obviously they proved it. They went to the Super Bowl both years. The defense wasn't their strong point, but it was good enough to still keep them in games. Now the Chiefs defense is a problem, an actual problem that is going to lose them games. That is unavoidable now. So they are allowing a first down on 41.6% of their players. So on 41.6%, they're allowing a first down. The next worst in the league is Philadelphia at 37.6. To put that in context, last year's worst defense in the entire league, Detroit, was 38.9. So they're currently on track to be worse than last year's worst defense in the entire league. So it just shows you just how bad this Chiefs defense is this year. And their pass rush is non-existent. I think before the weekend, they were 31st in pass rushing success in the league. They are just absolutely non-existent. When quarterbacks are getting time in the pocket to throw, and that Chiefs secondary isn't amazing, it just shows you teams are running all over them in the passing game. So yeah, this Chiefs defense is a problem, and it is now a problem enough to be costing them games. Chiefs, I think they'll still finish with a winning record, but it's going to be a long way back, especially considering their schedule, because they finished in first place. It's going to be a tough way back this season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So they're our surprise packages for good and bad reasons. Share yours with us on the socials and all that good stuff. Love to hear what your thoughts are, as we are now, like I say, officially over a quarter of the way through the NFL season. Some other bit of news from today, just to confirm: Dusseldorf, Frankfurt and Munich go forward as the 3 German cities to potentially host regular season games. And obviously with all the talk about London and the NFL this week, good to hear, although not necessarily from official sources, and some of the interview, if you actually listen to word for word, was a little bit contradictory in itself. But it does sound as though London games are here to stay, with at least 3 or possibly more most seasons moving forward. So that's obviously also good news from an international fan perspective. Josh, anything you want to come back in and say, my friend? I'm conscious you've been sitting there patiently for the last few minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, I really hope it's Frankfurt, because I used to live over there, so it'd be nice to be able to use the NFL as a nice little way of homecoming. But also, speaking of the Dolphins, potential upturn in luck. Tua Tagovailoa has been designated for return off IR. He could start on Sunday. So Brian Flores said earlier in the week that he'd been throwing and doing well. He was designated officially today. So he will make the trip over to England. As to whether or not he plays, that will be decided later on in the week. But definitely better news for the Dolphins.
Yeah, certainly looking forward to seeing Tua if he does suit up. I think it adds a layer of intrigue for the neutral, as opposed to Jacoby Brissett, which has obviously been a very pedestrian offense to watch over the last 2 or 3 weeks, although we've all commented that Tua obviously needs to pick things up himself if he does indeed suit back up. Fellas, that's it. Week 6 preview done in the can. Looking forward to it. Like I say, London for myself. So really looking forward to that. Josh, enjoy your break, my friend. We will get somebody in off the subs bench next week. Don't you worry. Me and Steve will be back reviewing everything that has gone down in Week 6. Looking forward to Week 7. God, this season's going by far too quickly, isn't it? Far, far, far too quickly. But until then, stay safe, everybody. Keep everything, eyes and ears peeled to the full 10 yards for all your NFL and college football content. And we will catch you all very soon on the next podcast.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Don't forget to find us on all our social channels, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok and YouTube. Head over to our website, full10yards.com, where you can find out more information about why we are #4the game.